The president said in the spring that Pentagon generals had briefed him that the greatest threat facing America is global warming. Is that still the assessment now that we are facing down a potential cyber war with Russia?
Well, let me first say there is no, while we are always prepared for any threat that any outside entity or country poses to the United States that relates to cyber or anything else, there is no current pending threat on as it relates to cyber. In terms of the threats you're touching on, that was a briefing from the military, so I'd point you to them.
And so, as far as anybody watching who's seen the coverage, it's very, at times, distressing images of Russian military movements. The number one threat facing the country right now remains global warming.
Well, Peter, I think it's important, as we're all educating the public here, to convey and reiterate the president has no intention of sending U.S. troops into Ukraine to fight in Ukraine. What we are doing is we are abiding by our obligations to our NATO allies and partners to ensure that they have the support and the resources that they need. And that is our right and our obligation as the United States.
Okay, and why do you guys think that sanctions are going to stop Putin if his goal ultimately is to redraw the map so it looks like it did 70 or 80 years ago? What sanction is going to stop them from doing that?
Well, I think just to kind of reiterate maybe something you touched on there, for anyone who watched his speech last night, what he made clear in that speech is that he doesn't even necessarily or doesn't recognize the independence of Ukraine as a country. And that certainly gives us an indication of where his intentions are at this point in time. Sanctions can be a powerful tool. They have been in a lot of moments throughout history, and what we view them as or how we're viewing them, as we're starting high, as Daleep just conveyed here, in terms of the significance and the severity of the sanctions that were announced today. Yes, our intention is to have a deterrent effect, and there are, what they have done to date is completely unacceptable. There's certainly far worse that could happen. What we want to do is prevent a large-scale invasion, death and destruction across Ukraine, devastation to the Ukrainian people. And that what happens with sanctions is they work over time. They're not an end. They're not intended to max out at the beginning. They're long-lasting and sustainable, and they're intended to squeeze. But if you look at what is happening now, what President Putin has stated as his intention is he wants to divide NATO. The opposite of that has happened, Peter. He also wanted a geopolitical project, Nord Stream 2, to go forward. That has not happened. He wants to make sure there is a vibrant economy for the Russian people. They're not on that track. So his intentions and his objectives are not playing out.
But so I guess to follow up on that, the president said before he got here that Putin knows if I am president of the United States, his days of tyranny and trying to intimidate the United States and those in Eastern Europe are over. It's 2.5 years later. He is intimidating the United States and those in Eastern Europe. What happened?
I'd hardly put it that way. I would look at it actually from the prism of the United States, and President Biden has rallied the world, rallied Europe to stand up against the efforts and the actions of President Putin. And we've laid out very clearly exactly
$4 gas, $5 gas, however how you guys think it's going to go, something like that. Is not intimidating?
You asked me if we were intimidated by President Putin, and I think the evidence of that doesn't exist.